The start of a new year provides us all with a great opportunity to recommit ourselves to any sort of goals that we might have going on in our personal and professional lives. And if you're checking out this channel, chances are pretty good you're looking for one or multiple book recommendations that you can look into this year to help sharpen your skills. If you read a lot of nonfiction books like I do, you know how big of a bummer it is to spend an Audible credit on a book that ends up being boring or otherwise not as helpful as you hope that it would be. And maybe even the opposite problem is even worse, where you find a book and you read it and it's so good and it's so helpful that it almost makes you kind of irrationally angry. Like, why could I have not found this book 5 years ago? Either way, coming at you today with my top 3 tips for books if you're interested in improving your skills in business, in sales and marketing, or to grow your own personal wealth or personal finance. We got 3 excellent recommendations for each one of them for you. My name is Patrick, and welcome back to My File Line. What's going on, YouTube family? Welcome back to my weekly 10-minute tirade about whatever in the heck that I want to talk about in any given week. Today we're here to talk about great books, or at least the books that I found to be particularly influential in my own personal transition from a W-2 employee down to a full-time 1099 self-employed situation. Now, I'll be the first to admit that most of the reading that I've done over the last 10 years has been listening to various weekly podcasts, namely Bigger Pockets, Choose FI, and the Mad Scientist. What I'm coming at you today are my top 3 book recommendations in each of 3 really popular business-related categories. And with the inclusion of a single honorable mention towards the end of the list, what that's going to leave us with is my definitive top 10 books for you to read in 2023 to develop your business skill set. So with that background in mind, let's jump into the list and see how the rankings shake out. Coming in at the 3rd best book in the wealth and personal finance category, we have Prosperity in the Age of Decline by Brian and Alan Beaulieu. Bit of a dark horse pick, this one, I know, and all the better if you're not currently familiar with the work that Brian and Alan Beaulieu's team of economists over at ITR Economics is doing. This is my number 1 book recommendation for anybody new to the worlds of business or investing who's currently unfamiliar with the macroeconomic climate that the U.S. housing market finds itself in the early to mid 2020. Now, if you're like me, a millennial, you were probably not even alive the last time that our housing market was facing similar economic headwinds that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis right now. Or if in any case you were alive in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but you weren't an economist and you weren't exactly paying attention to what was happening out there, it's easy to lose context with the major market movers of our market currently, and therefore any sort of expectation as to where the market might be going over the next 5 to 10 years. So the somewhat provocative title of Prosperity in the Age of Decline refers to the long-term market forecast that the team of economists at ITR Economics holds, which is namely that we can expect a major recession or possibly even a Great Depression event in the early to mid 2030s. And therefore, the title of the book is Strategies to Help You Prosper in an Age of Decline. So I certainly recommend that you dig into the book for all of the statistical and economic data that the team uses to make that prediction. And although the book may feel rather dated, because being that it was published more than 10 years ago, most of the references are from the 90s or early 2010s, but I encourage you to stick with the book because it provides a cohesive narrative to know where the U.S. economy was 40 years ago, 20 years ago, and then as we enter the COVID-19 pandemic. And then once you're done reading Prosperity in the Age of Decline, you can just get started immediately with the Trends Talk podcast, which is also provided by the same team at ITR Economics. It's a great recommendation for anybody who would like a full picture of the housing market and what are threats and opportunities as we move forward in the next decade. With that, we have the 3rd best book in the sales and marketing category, and number 8 on our list is none other than Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. A major theme throughout the entire sales and marketing category is one of storytelling. Namely that as salespeople, one of our most important jobs is to be able to craft a compelling story that's able to hold our audience's attention for long enough to complete an entire sales. Matthew Dix comes to us from the world of competitive storytelling, and his book Storyworthy feels like a field manual to understanding the mechanics of crafting a great story. It teaches us that great stories are usually the ones that through the subject's experience, they go through a permanent change in the way that they see the world. And the book includes high-level advice all the way up from that great stories ultimately center around a 5-second moment, all the way down to the small tactical bits about how you should start doing homework for life to help cultivate the seeds of your next great story, as well as the fact that you should avoid using accents in most situations. Not only will becoming a better storyteller help you in all business situations, but it's a really nice side benefit in that you were literally able to tell better stories. After all, who doesn't like hearing a great story? Next book we have coming up on our list, coming in as the #2 book in the personal wealth building and personal finance category, and a book that I find myself constantly recommending to brand new investors. We have Set for Life by Scott Trench. This selection was one of the earliest books to be released by the publishing arm of the Denver-based company BiggerPockets.com, and its author would go on to take the reins over from Josh Storkin himself by becoming CEO of the company and starting his own podcast. But before any of that went down, and dating all the way back to 2019, Scott Trench's book Set for Life proved to be the critical bridge from the Dave Ramsey's emphasis on frugality and paying off all of your debt, all the way through to the concept of reintroducing the idea of good debt and setting up a solid foundation to build long-term sustainable wealth. Key concepts in the book include why you need to gut out $25,000 in personal savings before you make any type of investment purchase whatsoever, as well as establishing a financial runway which you're able to benefit from, and that you can take big bets with your own time and career decisions later on in your life, as well as the insanely high compounded returns that you get off of making a single decision to buy a house hack that is closer to your job. In the author's own words, the book was written for anybody making roughly a median income, but including and especially those of us in our 20s and early 30s who are consider themselves to be gainfully employed and who want a predictable path towards accomplishing financial freedom in their own life. As great as all that sounds, and as highly regarded as I hold Scott Trench and all that he's accomplished within Bigger Pockets over the years, to me, this book can sometimes feel like I'm reading a textbook a little bit more than a cohesive narrative. It can be a little bit slow, and that's why it does not rank higher on this list. But certainly respect everything that Scott Trench has done over the last few years, and it was a particular honor running into him and having a beer with him at the Bigger Pockets conference in New Orleans in 2021. Taking the #6 slot, we have our first entry into the business category, and I did want to throw out a caveat before I introduce. So I thought a lot about it in putting this list together, and I simply could not be pinned down to only come up with a single recommendation for best business books that I've ever read. And luckily, all three of the authors that I'll be introducing to you throughout this video published a number of books in a collective works type of universe. And so as I introduce them to you, I'll introduce you first to the author and what I perceive to be the author's best work. But there will also be book recommendations that I will throw in there as well for you to read either before or during the book that I ultimately recommend. So my pick for the third best book to improve your business systems, regardless of where you are in your entrepreneurial journey, is none other than dad sweater wearing amateur comedian Mr. Mike Michalowicz and his book Fix This Next. Although arguably better known for his book Profit First, at least in my opinion anyway, Mike Michalowicz does a really interesting job at organizing and pulling together and classifying his earlier collective works, and one of his newer books, Fix This Next. A little bit of background into Mike Michalowicz. In his own words, the author publishes books to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. He was an entrepreneur with a couple of different companies, building them up over the course of his career with varying levels of success. And he writes books such as The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, Profit First, and Clockwork, specifically for entrepreneurs at different stages of development throughout his career, and just helping them, giving them the answers that he didn't have at the time. Now, with one of his newer books, Fix This Next, he organizes all of these books into a hierarchy, which he describes as the business hierarchy of need. And then he compares that quite directly to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, and basically asserts that in much the same way as the human body has a certain level and hierarchy of needs, that a business, that any sales-based business has a similar hierarchy that you should pay attention to and level of priority. At the most foundational level, we have the sales level, which is basically his assertion is that any sales-based company is not able to live for any extended period of time without generating sales, without generating revenue, without generating cash flow, in a very similar way that the human body is not going to be expected to be able to live for any extended period of time without food, water, and oxygen. Up from there, once you have shored up your level of the sales skills, you move on to the profit level, which is very similar to the human need for safety. not only survival, but sustainable and predictable survival, even though the weather patterns change. So if sales is the bottom level, the necessary food and water level, safety equates to profitability, which is in the sense that your business is able to perform profitably. Therefore, any changes in the market that might be outside of your control, you have a certain ability to withstand that. Once you've achieved both sales and profitability, you're able to move up into the order stage, which is basically a focus on systems of efficiency, of prioritization. And then we go up into the higher level orders from there, namely impact and legacy. But in creating this hierarchy and this structure, he lets you know, he gives you basically what works out to be a questionnaire as to what does your business need most and what do you need to fix next in your business. If it's at the sales level, you can read his books, The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, or perhaps The Pumpkin Plan. Profit level is all about the book Profit First. Like I said, it's his best known work. Order is very much akin to his book Clockwork. And again, he has other works as well. Personally, I can take or leave his dad joke and dorky personality that comes out in his books. But it is in fact a lesson of us all in authenticity. If you are going to be a content creator and you're going to be a leader of any type, best to be out there and speaking quite loudly in your own voice. And it truly is a lesson for us all. So with that comes our number 5 pick and the second best book written in the sales and marketing category. We have none other than the book Building a StoryBrand by Donald Miller. So our second pick in a row that draws inspiration from something that you learned way back in high school psychology class. Building a StoryBrand builds on our number 3 pick, Storyworthy, by tying the idea of Joseph Campbell's idea of the monomyth and tying it to our company's marketing efforts. Basically, the big idea is that great stories throughout time involve a hero following a predictable path. Starting first by answering the call to an adventure and recruiting mentors along the way, over the time experiencing trials and tribulations, and eventually climaxing in an actual descent into hell, literally or metaphorically, only to re-emerge back into society with some great knowledge or treasure, thereby creating order out of chaos. In his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, it identifies this pattern which human beings are hardwired to understand and identify with. Now, in the near future, I plan on making an entire video about how these archetypal story patterns both help and hurt us in our own path towards personal greatness and personal goal setting. The big impact of building a story brand to my own personal business is the concept that within this pattern, your company's business is not the hero of the story. Your company is the guy. The hero of this story, at least in their own minds, is your client. And your company's role in your client's life is helping them achieve the goal which they have set out to do, identifying the path for them that they need to walk in their own. As an added bonus, this book is very much how I created my company's personal mission statement. So if you stay tuned to the end of this video, you can see an example of the type of philosophy that building a story brand can help you create in your own business. And speaking of the sales and marketing category, coming in at the number 4 pick and our very first number 1 selection. Out of the sales and marketing category, we have our number 4 book, Pitch Anything by Orrin Clark. Probably the best example on today's list of a book that I really wish that I had found earlier in my sales career. Pitch Anything was one of those books that I had heard mentioned a couple of times over the years by a resource that I respect a lot in the realm of personal development. And even though the paperback version of Pitch Anything was released in 2014, I was pretty unfamiliar with it until the audiobook was released in early last year, early of 2022. And subsequently when it was released on the Audible app. Now, as a disclaimer, if you're unfamiliar with the author, he comes from the high-stress world of investment banking, and his Wolf of Wall Street style of both book writing and public speaking can come off as a bit abrasive if you're unfamiliar with that culture. But however, if you can get past that, and as the book title suggests, Pitch Anything is a no-nonsense book about nailing a successful sales pitch. Although interestingly, not before first considering the anatomy and development of the human brain over centuries of evolution. Absolutely key foundational concepts presented in Pitch Anything range from the importance of frame control, and that you can only truly capture your audience's information for a few moments at a time, as well as the evolutionary development of the 3 levels of the human brain, the reptilian brain, or what he calls the croc brain, the midbrain, and the neocortex. and how each individual stage either prevents or allows your message from truly penetrating the higher levels of your audience's brains. And most importantly, the importance of eradicating neediness from your sales pitch and to withdraw at the crucial moment to achieve a hook point. The timeless wisdom comes fast and often in his book, Pitch Anything, and it might be the type of book that you need to read 2 or 3 times to really absorb everything of what he's trying to say. But I promise you, your efforts will be well worth it. Taking the number 3 spot and the top crown for the best book recommendation I have for building your own personal wealth or personal finance category, we have The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Gaining additional points for being accessible and simple to understand, The Psychology of Money is written as a series of stories and parables of interrelating principles on frugality, on risk management, as well as how to develop your own investor philosophy. It dispenses with timeless wisdom to help you establish a framework to safely build wealth over a working lifetime. Just a small sampling of my favorite lessons from the book include the concept of it's a fee, not a fine. That mistakes you make along the way during your investment journey is not some form of cosmic punishment for things that you didn't think to do the first time, but opportunities to learn from your mistakes and improve your journey, and really just the cost of doing business as an investor. It's a fee, not a fine. As well as the concept that business owners, when surveyed, tend to substantially overestimate the degree to which they control the outcome of the success of their business moving forward, and therefore tend to de-emphasize or not properly consider the degree to which random luck or what your competition is doing, the degree to which that controls your financial future. As well as the idea is that wealth is what you don't see. It's the car that you don't buy or the really big and beautiful primary residence you don't invest in, or at least not yet. And perhaps the best part of the book is that because each chapter tells its own cohesive narrative, you can read the chapters in any order, refer back to the chapters in any order, and basically just come back to it as often as you need for that daily 10 to 20 minute affirmations to put good information back into your subconscious mind to help you stick towards your long-term goals. And while it is my number 1 book recommendation in the category of building your personal wealth, to be honest with you, it is barely on the podium when we're talking about the top 3 book recommendations that I have for you in 2023. Sitting high up on the mountaintop of my own personal recommendation for the best business books ever written is the next one on our list. Number 1 in my heart, and number 2 in the category of the best book series to help you build a baller business in 2023. It can be nothing other than So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. Oh boy, where do I even start with this? So Good They Can't Ignore You is definitely my number 1 book recommendation for anybody who wants to be successful or for anybody who wants to be happy. And in this case, we can draw our author's origination story back into the world of academia. Cal Newport's book originally started as a blog post rallying against what he described as the passion hypothesis, which is namely wisdom that had been doled out by academic advisors to students and to young adults for generations. In that, all you need to do to identify your best career is to find something that you're passionate about. Find a job that you can be passionate about, choose to do that for the full time of your career, and you'll never work a day in your life. Now, Cal thought this was really bad advice for 2 reasons. Number 1, it assumes that students, that young people, that people in general have these easily identifiable inborn passions that are going to provide a worthwhile North Star to devise an entire career around. But at number 2, even if they are able to correctly identify what those inbound passions are, that if they choose to pursue that sort of passion in terms of a career field, that they're never going to have any bad days and that they literally will not work a day in your life. And that if you did encounter any sort of difficulty or struggle with your career, it's probably a scenario that you chose the wrong industry to begin. Cal Newport throws a lot of that advice to the side and basically writes a book having something of a counter argument, which he calls the craftsman's mindset or the dream job elixir. Basically, as the So Good They Can't Ignore You lays out, the idea is that you want to adopt the craftsman's mindset, that you don't want to find something that you can be passionate about, but something which you feel drawn to become really, really good at. By engaging in deliberate practice, you generate what he calls rare and valuable skills. Skills which are not only rare in that most of your competition does not possess them, but also valuable in the sense that the market literally values it and will pay for it. And by adopting this craftsman's mindset of generating what he calls career capital, you develop these rare and valuable skills, which later on in your career, once you were good at what you do and have a reputation for excellence, you're able to exchange that career capital in much the same way that you could exchange financial capital to purchase things which the market considers to be of value. So Good They Can't Ignore You serves as an absolute rock-solid foundation to build any particular growing skill set on. And then further books that Cal Newport have come out with include Deep Work, which is basically embracing the idea of deliberate practice. How do you engage in deliberate practice and what forces pull against your ability to engage in deep work. The sequel to Deep Work is called Digital Minimalism, which is basically fighting against those distractions, things like email and social media, which pull away from your ability to do deep work. And his most recent book is titled A World Without Email, so you can see he's clearly following this rabbit trail deeper and deeper. But in any case, So Good They Can't Ignore You is an excellent place to start. Cal Newport is a great resource, although only one person can take the #1 spot. So with that excellent option behind us, we only have one spot left. My #1 book recommendation for anybody who wants to develop business systems in 2023. But before I get to that, I did want to throw out something of an honorable mention. It's my impression that a lot of real estate agents will be coming back to this channel looking for book recommendations. And although my honorable mention pick doesn't have the general appeal in that it will truly benefit anybody, any business owner, anybody in the realm of business by reading it. If you do find yourself new to the world of real estate sales and looking for an excellent recommendation, I very highly recommend David Green's book series, Sold, Skill, and then Scale, which should be coming out later on this year. If you are a brand new real estate agent, you can think of Sold as basically the field manual for what are the foundational fundamentals that you should be learning to do well as a real estate agent. Scale is the sequel to that, which is basically how do you take an experienced agent and teach them the skills necessary to truly dominate their market and to take market share. And then Scale should be coming out later on in the year. That's going to have a lot more to do with creating scalable and efficient business systems, and as well as working more high-level concepts of investment philosophy into that. If you're new to Bigger Pockets, if you're new to the work of David Green, like I said, I think it's a really excellent recommendation for you to develop your skill set as a real estate agent specifically. So without any more discussion, without any more caveats, we only have one recommendation left for you. I've already talked to you about So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, and the only author that I can say is better than that can be none other than Jim Collins and his book, Great by Choice. In keeping with the theme of great business authors over great individual books written about business, there can be no better example than the collective work of Jim Collins. And while he's probably better known for his work Good to Great as well as Built to Last, at least in my opinion anyway, Great by Choice is not only his best work, but his most recent work as well. Now, if you're not familiar with how Jim Collins writes his books, he's very much a researcher at heart, coming out of a collegiate setting over in the Ivy Leagues over on the West Coast. He and his team of researchers have written a number of books over the years, which looks into matched pair analysis of data available from publicly traded companies to research fundamental questions about business success. His book, Good to Great, is very much about what is systematically different from companies that go from a span of mediocre results, which then see a turning point into decade after decade of sustained great results, and in what way are they systematically differentiated from the companies that are the same size in the same industry with the same opportunity who don't follow that same path to greatness. Built to Last, as that name implies, looks into what is systematically differentiated by these huge dynastic companies which succeed decade in, decade out, and actually, in fact, outlive the charismatic leaders that set the companies up. And how are those companies differentiated from companies that do not see that same decade after decade level of continued success? Great by Choice seeks to find companies which excel specifically in environments of uncertainty and of rapid change. And because of that, I do think it's his best and his most applicable work. And as I went with #2, I can't really give you individual recommendations on the best concepts from the book because the entire book is the highlight reel. Namely, in order to achieve 10x results in an environment of high uncertainty and change, business owners are taught to engage in fanatic discipline via the 20-mile march, to engage in empirical creativity by firing bullets before cannonballs, and then to also engage constantly in productive paranoia, to always carry more oxygen canisters than you think you will need because of the asymmetric risk of running out of oxygen and not living to tell another tale. And arguably the book on Return on Luck is the single best chapter that he's written, and arguably the best chapter, motivationally speaking, that you could read about what is the single thing that you need to control in order to have a great result in terms of business and wealth creation over an investment lifetime. So although arguably you probably should start with his book Good to Great if you're totally new to the world of Jim Collins, but I'm here to tell you that Great by Choice is the #1 book that you could possibly read to give you not only the motivation, but the skill set that you need to tackle this great world of change and unpredictability. So there we have it. That is my definitive top 10 book recommendations for you to check out in early 2023. Definitely let me know in the comments section what you thought about my list. Did I forget anything that's high on your list of top 10 that didn't include on my list? Did I recommend any books that you weren't familiar with or that you otherwise might want to dive back into? If so, feel free to like this channel and feel free to share it with anybody who you think might be looking for a great book recommendation. Definitely check out our video that we have coming up next week. My name is Patrick, and this has been My FI Life.